So for our sketchbook project this week and our project next week, we're going to continue our work with value scales. And on our shoe, we applied value by shading blended, where we added lots of layers, small circular motions, and we used different pencils to create our lights and our darks. And we've already done this, so I'm going to let you continue that on your own. But this side is going to be dark, this side is going to be light, and this is called blended. And for blended, we're showing value by pressure and layers. The next three we're going to talk about are going to be new techniques, and we're going to practice those in our sketchbook before we use them on our project. So the first one I want to talk about is stippling. Stippling is essentially just a variety of dots. You want to hold your pencil closer to the tip this time, whereas up here with blended, we're holding it out kind of by the eraser and using small circular motions to blend. We really don't want to blend the dots together, so we can hold it a little bit closer. You want it to be pretty random, and you always go over your area with a light tone first, and the way that you get lights with stippling is by space. So the more space, the lighter it'll look. And then we also do layers with this one as well. So after I do my light layer, I'm going to go back and do my medium, and every time I go back over it, it's going to eliminate some space between the dots, and I can gradiate them out to that light layer. So I'm never going to go back over the light side. I'm just going to continue to add layers from the dark side over. And blend those out. And then again, I'm going to go back, and I'm just decreasing the amount of space between my dots. I'll show you from the side. And the less space between the dots, the darker it'll appear. So I'm not picking my pencil up really far from the paper. I'm keeping it pretty close, but I'm also not organizing my dots. I'm just kind of letting my wrist work around in the space that I'm trying to add layers. And then I would continue and continue and continue until this side gets dark as I am going for. And we want a full range of value scales. So spend some time, blend that out. This should be 50%. And for stippling, you're going to have to bring those layers out in order to create that 50% like grayscale, essentially, right here. Your darks are going to come out pretty far. If you do this blended one first, that'll give you a good indication of where your dark should fade, essentially. But it's going to be quite a few layers with stippling. This one is probably the one that will take the longest for our new set of techniques. I'm going to focus my camera. There we go. The next one I want to talk about is cross-hatching. And again, we're going to use space and layers to show value. So cross-hatching, the one thing, there's two things I do not want to see. I don't want to see X's, and I don't want to see hashtags or the pound sign. All of these three techniques that we're going to talk about today are successful only when they feel kind of chaotic. So you're controlling this chaos, but if they feel too aligned or too perfect or too much of a pattern, then they're not going to be as successful. So again, with cross-hatching, it's just 2 lines going different directions, but I'm going to start with a layer of light, and I'm going to vary the length of my lines all the way across. Then I'm going to do the same thing going this way. Okay, and not every line needs a cross line. You're just adding a series of hatch marks in one direction and with the other direction. And then again, just like in all the other ones, I'm going to add some layers, go back over it in 2 different directions. The other thing I don't want to see with the cross hatching, is I don't want to see this. That's too aligned, it's too perfect, it's going to feel too patterned. You want it to be more chaotic than that, or more random than that. And again, all your layers are doing is decreasing the amount of space between those lines. You can begin to add a little bit of pressure on the dark side, but the goal really is to remove the space in order to show that value. Okay? So again, you want your 50% gray here, darks on this side, lights on that side. The last one we're going to talk about is scumbling. And again, same with the other 2, space and layers are how we are going to achieve our values. Scumbling is probably the most chaotic or most random technique of the 3, and it's scribbling, but you should not scribble in circles. In fact, this is what you don't want to do. You want to scribble in a random or seemingly random way, and I'm going to add the lights, and then I'm just going to add layers. I pick up my pencil quite a bit so that I'm not constantly connected to my lines. I'm not too concerned about the edge of my rectangle, and my wrist is not touching the table. That's another thing that is helpful in doing these techniques. I pick up my wrist and I'm using my whole arm as I move, which allows me a little bit more freedom, I think. And then I would just add layers on that dark side. And blend it into the light side. Okay, so work on those 4 value scales before you start your sketchbook assignment. And then for your sketchbook assignment, there's a couple things I want you to know before you get started on that. So I'm going to kind of show you on the back of here. Our sketchbook assignment is these steps. The first step is to divide your paper into fourths. You might have already done this, but I'm just going to walk through it. The second step is to write block letters or shapes in those spaces. And then the third step is going to divide that space into smaller sections. And so what you want to kind of be careful of is you want to be careful of creating teeny tiny little spaces and creating really large spaces. So I'm just going to divide with a bunch of lines. I can do some more shapes. I can stop them kind of in the middle. I don't have to go all the way through. Okay, and then I'm going to look for like large spaces. So this space is quite large, so I'm going to divide it further. And then this space is quite large, so I'm going to divide it further. There's a couple others. And then the other thing I'm going to look for is small spaces. And I don't really have a whole lot of small spaces. Okay, right here is a good example. These are all really teeny tiny, and that's going to make my life a little bit difficult. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to erase this line, and I'm going to merge that into that other shape. But also this is a little big, so I'm going to divide it, and again here I'm going to divide it there. Okay. So that's kind of how you set up the sketchbook assignments. Okay, and then there are some rules that I want you to kind of pay attention to for the sketchbook assignment. And this is also going to be the rules for our project next week. So first of all, lights cannot touch lights, and darks cannot touch darks. So what I mean by that is so each space that we've created in our overlapping of shapes is going to be a new space, its own space, okay? And so we want to add a value scale in each of these individual spaces that we've now created. And you always want to start in a corner. It doesn't matter which corner that you start in, but a corner is important. So here on my example, I've started in this corner, and I've cross-hatched from left to right, and I've gradiated that value out. So this side is my dark, and this side is my light. Then the next one touching it is then defined by the one that it's touching. So this one has to start light and move to dark, because lights cannot touch lights and darks cannot touch darks. So they have to be opposite. And what's going to happen, and what you'll see, is that your outlines tend to disappear into the dark side, and then your shapes are only defined by your value scales and how they invert as you work. So right here is a corner. So technically darks are not touching, because corners don't really count if they're just touching on the corner like that. But on this shape I also had to change the way I did my value scale, because up here was all light. So if I started dark here and went to light on this side, lights would be touching. So I had to change my value scale to make dark up the top, light up at the bottom. So for this one, I've got darks on this wall to about there, and then lights on this side. So I would add in my cross-hatching, always start with light, and then I would just add more for that dark side to create my pattern. And then I would move on to the next shape. So right here I've got dark, this is light, so I would go ahead and add in my technique, and it's going to be dark on this side and light on that side, and I would continue that until that section is full. I want you to have a different technique in each of our boxes, and we're not going to even pay attention to our letters and our shapes for right now. We're just going to blend them into the background. So all of these spaces that I've created by overlapping lines and my shapes are now new spaces, and each of them gets their own value scale. This would be my blended, this would be my scumbling, this would be cross-hatching, and this would be stippling. And then that is all we are working on for the rest of this week. That should be due on Monday, as it is your sketchbook assignment, and then we'll have a good understanding of the techniques to start on our project on Monday, all right?